It's almost Easter, which means it's time for Jamaican Easter Bun. This treat is deep, rich and loaded with warm spices. With or without cheese, it's a banger. Hey, I'm Nick and this Easter you won't have to bite. I'm making Easter Bun from scratch and showing you how to get it just right, plus a few tips to fine tune it to your taste. Whether you want it with or without alcohol or you prefer it extra dense, I've got you covered. As usual, the ingredients list will be in the description. This is actually pretty simple, so let's get into it. The exact origins are unclear, but Jamaican Easter Bun is said to have evolved from the British hot cross bun. Over time, Jamaicans made it their own, adding more spices, dried fruits and richness, making it denser and more flavorful. Hot cross buns are still made in Jamaica during Easter, but they're nowhere near as popular as Easter buns. Now, let's make it from scratch. For our bun batter, we need to mix the wet and dry ingredients separately, so let's start with the dry. I want consistency and the best way to get that is by weighing ingredients. A pound is always a pound, but 2 cups is not always a pound. Trust me, this makes a world of difference if you bake often. So if you don't already have a kitchen scale, consider investing in one or just replace the batteries in the one you already have. To start, I need 24 ounces or a pound and a half of all-purpose flour. Next, I'm adding 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And now for my secret ingredient, this is what takes the flavor to another level. 1.5 teaspoons of freshly ground allspice. Next, 1.5 teaspoons of freshly grated nutmeg. That warm spice flavor is key for Easter bun. Then we've got powdered cinnamon. I'm adding a tablespoon or 3 teaspoons, but you could easily double this if you want a stronger cinnamon kick. Finally, half teaspoon of salt. This really brings all the flavors together. And that's it for the dry ingredients. You'd think Easter bun takes a long time because of how incredibly it tastes, but we can whip this up in about 10 to 15 minutes minus bake time. Speaking of whipping up, let's get into the wet ingredients. I'm using 8 ounces or half pound of brown sugar for this recipe. To that I'm adding 2 small whole eggs. The recipe only calls for 1, but since mine are small I'm using 2. Give that a quick whisk before adding. And if eggs aren't your thing, you can skip them entirely. Next, 3 ounces of honey. This adds moisture, sweetness and deep rich flavor. Now for 4 ounces of molasses. Shout out to the subscriber who pointed out in a previous video that this looks like blackstrap molasses. And they're right, a lot of local brands just label it as molasses without making a distinction. If I had to guess, molasses in bun probably dates back to colonial times. It was a cheap, often unwanted byproduct of sugar production, and since Jamaica was a major sugar producer, it made sense to use it. Molasses gives the bun that deep caramel flavor, moisture and rich color. Speaking of moisture, next up 3 ounces of guava jam. This adds amazing flavor and texture. Other jams and even jellies like strawberry or grape work too. It really makes a difference. Next I'm adding 1.5 tablespoons of vanilla and half tablespoon of orange zest. That little bit of zest brightens the flavors, adding aroma and depth to the bun. Traditionally, candied mixed peel is used for the same effect, but personally I'm not a fan of the mixed peel in buns. People are usually split on this, so let me know down in the comments, mixed peel or no mixed peel. Now for the stouts. This is what gives the bun its deep caramel notes and signature flavor. There's a lot of flexibility here, you can use any stout you like or even mix them up. Guinness and Dragon Stout are really popular choices, but if you want a non-alcoholic option, try a malted beverage like Malta. I'm using Spitfire Dragon Stout, which has a higher alcohol content, and Guinness. By weight, that's 20 ounces of liquid, 10 ounces per bottle. And for a final wet ingredient, I have 4 ounces or 1 stick of melted butter. Before adding, make sure it cools so it doesn't scramble the egg. Typically the wet ingredients minus the eggs are heated. This helps dissolve the sugar and enhances the flavors, but it's not totally necessary, especially since it adds an extra step. Not only do you have to heat it up, but you also have to wait until it cools down. I'm skipping that today to keep things simple. Next, let's sift the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients. Sifting helps remove lumps and makes mixing much easier. Give that a mix just to hydrate the flour. As with most batters, we don't want to overmix. Overmixing contributes to making our final product tough and dense. Most people are usually split on the next ingredients. I'm using some chopped raisins and cherries. Mixed peels are usually added at this step, but I'm skipping them. Personally, I don't enjoy biting into bits of mixed peel in my bun. I've been soaking these for about 45 minutes in some red label wine. White rum is more traditional, but you could also use stout. If you're making a non-alcoholic version, you can use a malted beverage like Malta. Keep in mind that whatever liquid you use to soak your fruits will influence the taste of your bun. Next, I'm straining off the excess liquor from the fruits before adding them into the batter. I use a little too much red label wine, so I don't want all of that in the mix. The extra liquid will throw off the texture I'm going for. Now, just gently fold the fruits in. This batter has a good consistency to hold the fruits in suspension. That's just so they stay evenly distributed. If the batter was thinner, the fruits will sink to the bottom of the loaf pan. A thinner batter will give us a much denser bun like this test batch I made. It has a finer closed crumb and stays moist for longer. To get a denser loaf, simply add a couple more ounces of stout or use slightly less flour. This recipe makes 3 7-inch loaves or 2 larger 9-inch loaves. I'm using aluminum pans. They come in handy, especially if you're baking in bulk. Get those nicely greased, then we can add our butter. I'm splitting the butter evenly between all 3 pans. Make sure to get every last bit. The smell of this is incredible. That's the smell of Easter. To decorate this, I'm keeping it simple with a nice row of cherries on each loaf. You can also use some soaked fruits to decorate this for a more traditional touch. Next, I'm going to bake these at 300 degrees Fahrenheit. They should take about an hour and a half to cook through. You could bake them at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour, but that would give us a drier bun. Before our bun is done baking, let's make a glaze to finish this off. In my pan, I'm adding about 1/4 cups of honey, a couple tablespoons of that guava jam, some of the juices from the cherries, and a splash of water. This is just a quick glaze I'm making with ingredients I have on hand. You could get away with simply thinning out the guava jam and adding a bit of honey, or just use honey on its own. Any syrupy liquid you want to use will probably work. I'm just going to let this reduce until I have a nice consistency I can brush onto our buns. Speaking of buns, these are ready. They smell incredible. Those deep caramel flavors from the stout and molasses are really shining through, and the warm spices are so comforting. To make sure they're fully baked, we can use the toothpick test. If it comes out clean, we know it's done. If it comes out messy, just let it bake a little longer. And those are perfect. I think I can pop these out and place them on a rack to cool more efficiently. Before they cool down completely though, I'm going to brush them with that glaze we just made. This will give us that beautiful sheen and soft sticky crust. Now, these take a while to cool completely, but trust me, it's worth the wait. You could eat it hot right out of the oven, but you won't get that full range of flavor until it's fully cooled down. In fact, these actually get better after a day or two. Look at that beautiful cross section. And of course, we can't have Easter bun without cheese. Not just any cheese though, it has to be Jamaican processed cheese. This is the perfect match between sweet and savory. With all those delicious warm spices, it's no wonder this bun is so popular with Jamaicans. So there you have it, a very delicious and simple Easter bun recipe with a few ways you can tweak it to suit your taste. Let me know how you like your bun, or if you plan on giving this recipe a try. I always love hearing from you. This was scrumptious, and if you love this recipe, you will want to see how I made escovitch fish. Trust me, it's the perfect next step for your Easter menu. Catch you in the next one.